Oh, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Alba. Me, we're out here to tell you a story. Well, look at the sky here. Normally it's blue, 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 and it's hazy, hazy, hazy. And the people have been saying, "Oh, that's just fog." No, it smells like smoke, tastes like smoke. It is smoke. Where's that smoke coming from? Canada. And here we are down in the south, and down in the south, right? Kind of near Charlotte, North Carolina. Right? And our wind is primarily west northwest, right? And so, what's going on? Last night, red clear skies, beautiful starry night. No, no moon. Woke up around 3, and when I went in from looking at the stars at around 10:30, the last of whatever glow from the sun was going in. It was dark, dark, and stars. And when I woke up around 3:30, I went out there. Still pretty starry, but not quite as. And I sat in my stargazing chair and I looked up, and within, oh, 30 minutes, it wasn't like there were clouds. It just, the stars dimmed. They were still there, but they dimmed. So, that's interesting. Anyway, I went in, went to sleep, came out in the morning. mm, Yeah, I'll have a box to go, and a box to go, and a bag of that. Um, so the air is full of smoke, and I have a sense that um, there's something going on above us, and the powers that shouldn't be don't want us to see it. So usually, with a phenomenon like this, because I'm way up in the mountains, and as the night between 6 and 10, the humidity. So, tell you, what do you think all this sky is?
According to Lisa, we've seen it on the news.
Fires from Canada?
Canada, yeah. It's coming from Canada where they had that fire.
Yeah, they still are.
Yeah.
It almost looks like we aren't supposed to look up. Like something's going on up there, and let's pull the blinds over. Just because it almost goes straight down to the ground. I've never seen it like this. And the smoke that would come from like 3,000 miles away should be way high up in the air, not like on the ground.
Oh, no. Well, this is the first time I've ever seen it like this.
Yeah, I know. So that's a report from the street. Anyway, I have some errands to do, and they're about to close. So I'm going to take my victuals, which I will use to make dinner tonight, and so. And everyone's like whining about this and whining about that. The big issue: transgender sports and bathrooms, and half of the little islands in the Pacific are going underwater, and you have the United Nations saying, "Hey, how about some help?" I mean, they had nothing to do with it, and they are taking on the majority of the harm. It's very interesting. So that's kind of the world we're in, world we've always been in, and whether we're going to, we have a great opportunity. Usually, every 60,000 years or so, we have an opportunity where we can step up and basically see a change happen for the positive. But most people are too distracted, about their stuff, about this, about that, and don't really do anything about it. So, let's see. Look at what's on the old internet.
DemocracyNow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Evacuation efforts are underway in southern Ukraine, where floodwaters are rising after a dam on the Dnipro River was breached overnight in the Russian-occupied Ukrainian town of Nova Kakhovka. The breach has created an additional humanitarian disaster in an area that's seen heavy fighting since Russia's invasion. Ukraine's government says floodwaters are threatening 80 towns and villages, as well as the city of Kherson, home to 300,000 people. The breach could also limit drinking water supplies across Kherson and Crimea. Ukrainian officials accuse Russia's military of deliberately sabotaging the dam, calling it an act of ecocide. Russian officials blamed Ukrainian artillery fire for the breach. The disaster has raised fears of a nuclear accident at Europe's largest nuclear power station. The 6 reactors of Zaporizhzhia plant, which is upstream of the dam breach. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, said earlier today the plant relies on a reservoir formed by the dam for critical cooling systems at the nuclear plant.
Absence of cooling water in the essential water systems for an extended period of time would cause fuel melt and inoperability of the emergency diesel generators. However, our current assessment is that there is no immediate risk to the safety of the plant. We are following this by the minute, as you can imagine.
The dam breach came as Russia's military said it had repelled a major offensive by Ukrainian forces in the Russian-occupied Donetsk region. It's believed to be the start of a long-anticipated counteroffensive by Ukraine's army. We'll have more on the dam crisis in Ukraine later in the broadcast. In Haiti, at least 42 people have died. Dozens more have been injured. Over 13,000 people have been forced from their homes after a weekend of nonstop rain caused rivers to overtop their banks, triggering flash floods and landslides. Even before the flooding, the UN reported more than 5 million Haitians, or nearly half the population, were in need of humanitarian assistance. In eastern Canada, firefighters have contained a massive wildfire that's driven thousands of people from their homes in Nova Scotia and triggered air quakes as far south as the U.S. state of Virginia. Another major fire in southwestern Nova Scotia continues to burn out of control. On Monday, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reported the past year saw one of the largest surges of carbon dioxide levels on record, bringing atmospheric levels of the heat-trapping gas to 424 parts per million. That's 50% higher than levels at the start of the Industrial Revolution and the highest level of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere in over 4 million years. China's has accused the United States of provocative and dangerous actions after U.S. and Chinese warships came into close contact in the Taiwan Strait. Video of Saturday's incident released by the Pentagon shows a Chinese warship coming within 150 yards of a U.S. destroyer. This comes just days after the Pentagon said a Chinese fighter jet cut across the path of the U.S. spy plane as it flew over the South China Sea. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson defended the maneuvers.
I want to emphasize that the truth is the U.S. side stirred up troubles and made provocations first, while the Chinese side dealt with this in accordance with corresponding laws and regulations. China always respects the freedoms of navigation and overflight enjoyed by all countries under international law.
Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers have invited Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address a joint session of Congress later this month. The invitation came as U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with his Indian counterpart in New Delhi, pressing cooperation with India in the face of the growing military tensions between the United States and China.
The U.S.-India partnership is a cornerstone of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Our deepening bonds show how technological innovation and growing military cooperation between two great powers can be a force for global good.
The bank died after Israeli soldiers shot him in the head last week while he and his father sat in a car outside their home in Nabi Saleh. Israeli forces stormed the residential neighborhood and started firing indiscriminately, hitting Mohammed Tamimi and his father, who was also seriously wounded. Tamimi succumbed to his wounds Monday, 4 days after being put on life support. Relatives are demanding justice. This is his uncle.
He was born, he stayed 30 days in the incubator, but after he grew up a bit and started walking, I started to be active. He stole hearts. Mohammed is a social child with a strong will.
Yes, a social child with strong will.
So it became a criminal undertaking. The Iraq case is different. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. I firmly believe that the Iraq War stemmed from the intentions of the George W. Bush administration to embark upon a preposterous effort to remake the entire Greater Middle East. So it was deeply flawed from the outset. I think it was illegal. And yes, it was a criminal undertaking.
So the first essay is by Eric Edstrom, who also went to West Point, wrote a very good book that I read. And just a couple points he makes in his essay I want to ask you about. He writes, military indoctrination is the voluntary surrender of one's own identity to join a profession that often takes away the human dignity of others by force. Through repetition, service members have their values, behaviors, and identity recalibrated with the ultimate aim of making them willing to kill or be killed in political violence without thinking about it too much. It is the construction of blind faith in the state and the deconstruction of any critical thinking that could stand in opposition to the state's aims. He went to West Point. You went to West Point. Is that a correct assessment of what you are taught?
280. It had been barely a century and a half since the world's greatest empire first set foot in Britain. Battle after battle, the legions of Rome subdued this mythical island fortress. Big cities filled with elaborate amphitheaters, hippodromes, bathhouses, and every edifice known to Roman architecture gradually appeared all over Britain. Now, at the very turn of the 3rd century, the province is thriving. Indeed, less impressive than Rome and Alexandria, Londinium and Eboracum still captivate the eye with their splendor. Latin and Celtic speech pervades the streets of the urban landscape. Lavish villas, no different than the ones a traveler would see in Tuscany or Capua, fill the British countryside. Even in the deep interior of the province, where Latin is still a foreign language, buildings have tiled roofs and households enjoy luxury items like wheel-turned pottery shipped from as far as Africa.
This man is a close neighbor of mine. He's about to lose his home, but I want to do something special for him.
He is.
Life in Roman Britannia is peaceful and somewhat detached from the mainland. Occasional raids of wild painted warriors from the north are the most significant inconvenience for the local populace. Yet a massive wall, built close to a century ago by Emperor Hadrian, provides security from the savage northern tribes. 500 AD. It had been barely a century since a governor appointed by Rome last resided in Britain. The empire that controlled these lands for over 350 years is now, at best, a corrupted memory. Hailing from the inhospitable.
This is the New York Times from 1962. This is the New York Times from 2022. This is the CBS Evening News from 1952.
And a very good evening, everybody, coast to coast.
This is the CBS Evening News from 2022.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us.
There's a widespread idea that the older news from the 50s and 60s came from some sort of golden age, where the news was delivered straight without any kind of political bias. So, is it true? The answer I found is actually yeah, kind of. In the 50s and 60s, cultural, technological, and political forces came together to create a unique moment in time that this video is going to explore. Along the way, we're going to talk about the rise of television, Joe McCarthy, 60s radicals, and even a bit of Ronald Reagan. To set the scene, we're going to start with a quote from the 1920s, which says, "It is often very illuminating to ask yourself how you got at the facts upon which you base your opinion. Who actually saw, heard, felt, counted, named the thing about which you have an opinion? Was it the man who told you, or the man who told him, or someone still further removed? And how much was he permitted to see?" Walter Lippmann from Public Opinion, 1922. World War I taught sobering lessons to intellectuals of the 1920s. Nations on both sides of the conflict heavily propagandized their own citizens, each side convincing their own public that they were existentially threatened by cartoonish villains on the other side. Through that process, nations were able to send seemingly endless soldiers to their front lines, each side fighting in their own version of reality. The propaganda worked so well that the fighting became difficult to stop, making the war longer and more deadly than it otherwise probably would have been. So emerging from the haze and the confusion of World War I was this new generation of intellectuals, with Walter Lippmann probably being the most famous, that were especially concerned with this ability to manipulate the public and the concerns that posed for the social order. At the same time, there was this new technology developing that seemed especially suited to do that manipulation, which was the radio. Radio was a compelling technology, which meant that relatively few people, the people who owned radio stations, could reach a huge audience, which meant that they had a potentially huge influence that could be used nefariously and without accountability. These days we have the internet, so if the government or maybe news organizations lie to us or misrepresent something, citizens can go on social media and maybe upload a video to show us what's actually happening. So that's not perfect, but it's at least some kind of check against centralized power. But people at the time didn't have that. So to a greater extent, they had to trust what they heard on the news. That meant that those who were in charge of delivering news at the time had a lot of power. They had a lot of power in telling the public what was happening in the world. And even through subtle manipulations, like using certain words or omitting certain facts, they could shape how the public felt about those things. So that brought out a concern for democracy. And from that came a doctrine of social responsibility, especially when it came to those who were in charge of delivering.
And what do you think about that? Was there ever any responsibility to tell the truth? I don't think so. Anyway, 19 minutes and 34 seconds. When we hit 2020, I'm going to be on my way. Thanks for the one thumbs up, whoever sent it. And remember, if you want to send something to my PayPal, it's the dudeawake42@gmail. Okay. Okay. So I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. And I'll probably be back coming on in 2 hours or more. Okay.